I'm Shannon Bream.
I'm Bill Hemmer.
I'm Kennedy, and this is the Fox News Rundown.
Wednesday, July 28th, 2021. I'm Lisa Brady. Masks are back, thanks to a COVID surge that's also fueling renewed debate about vaccine misinformation, especially on social media.
Where exactly do you draw the line between opinion, which should be acceptable but may turn out to be wrong, and outright fabrications, which in this case is a life and death matter?
I'm Dave Anthony. Millions of Americans have needed unemployment benefits to get by in this pandemic, but thieves are also cashing in, stealing billions of dollars.
There are cases after cases reported of people who need the unemployment, but they're told, we can't give you this benefit because someone using your information already has a claim filed in a different state, or we already paid out this benefit to someone posing as you. So it does hurt real people.
And I'm Janice Dean. I've got the final word on the Fox News Rundown.
Rising COVID cases fueled by the Delta variant are prompting federal health officials to revise their guidance once again, recommending a mask even if you're vaccinated, depending on where you are.
In areas with substantial and high transmission, CDC recommends fully vaccinated people wear masks in public indoor settings to help prevent the spread of the Delta variant and protect others.
CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky says they're following the science and that the new science is worrisome, showing some fully vaccinated people can catch and spread the variant. They're also recommending a return to universal masking at K through 12 schools. All teachers, staff, students, and visitors, regardless of vaccination status. Not long after the Tuesday announcement, the White House staff was told to mask up again indoors. This just 2 months after urging the public to get vaxxed or masked.
The more we learn about this virus and the Delta variation, the more we have to be worried and concerned.
President Biden urging Americans again to get vaccinated and not ruling out requiring it for federal employees. But he also vows we're not going back to lockdowns, that more vaccinations and mask wearing in areas most impacted by the Delta variant will enable the country to avoid those kinds of disruptions. White House spokeswoman Jen Psaki says health officials are trying to save lives.
And our responsibility and the responsibility of public health officials is to continue to provide updated guidance if it warrants from an evolving virus.
And the White House also continues a campaign against COVID and vaccine misinformation. That's led to Republican accusations of big tech and government censorship through social media. But the Biden administration blames misinformation, at least in part, for millions of people still being hesitant to get a COVID vaccine.
Well, the misinformation certainly is not helping.
Howard Kurtz is the host of Fox News Channel's Media Buzz and the Media Buzz Meter podcast.
And Facebook is in the, I would say, very familiar position of trying to play catch-up, of insisting it's doing the best it can while not being transparent about the efforts. And it has become a major way for just outright lies and fabrications about the dangers of the vaccine and, could it be used to implant microchips in people, to spread to some people who might be on the fence about getting it. But there's many, many reasons why. I've read all the interviews with people who are still considering it, who ruled it out, and it's a much more complicated problem than the media coverage sometimes suggests.
Well, and there's also been a debate about exactly what misinformation is. For instance, the Wuhan lab leak story that first was considered a conspiracy theory, now it's being taken much more seriously, right?
That is a perfect, in fact, a classic example of how politics can affect these big tech companies and what they consider to be acceptable discourse. I mean, until a few weeks ago, you could not post on Facebook anything defending the notion that the coronavirus 19 originated in the Chinese lab at Wuhan. It was considered to be completely out of bounds. Well, then more reporting showed perhaps it was plausible. Biden administration taking it more seriously. Now it's okay to post about that. So I think one of the reasons it's hard for these social media giants, although I think they could do a much better job, and Facebook, by the way, declined last year, requested internally for additional money and resources to be spent on getting rid of these falsehoods. Where exactly do you draw the line between opinion, which should be acceptable, but may turn out to be wrong, and outright fabrications, which in this case is a life and death matter because some of the people who don't get vaccinated could, of course, catch the virus, be hospitalized, and perhaps die.
Then another question that's evolved from that question is, where do you draw the line, about the government getting involved in what information people can see or not see, especially when you have the White House spokeswoman, Jen Psaki, using, phrases like, we're flagging, certain things.
The government should not be involved, period. I mean, these are private companies, and the government, Psaki and others later said, she didn't mean that Facebook would do whatever they wanted when she said that the Biden administration was flagging problematic content about COVID vaccines, that it's kind of pushback that the White House would engage in with any media company. Hey, we don't like what you wrote, or we think this is a problem, or we think this isn't true. That's okay. Working together just fuels the distrust of Silicon Valley companies like Facebook, because then it gets into the question of, is it just politically damaging to the White House to have some of this stuff out there, as opposed to seeing it in much more black and white terms. But ironically, there was this huge uproar. Facebook is colluding with the Biden White House after those comments by Jen Psaki. And then a day or so later, it was President Biden himself who said Facebook is killing people, remarks so over the line that he had to walk it back. Well, it's not Facebook that's killing people. It's these 12 people who, according to an advocacy group, are spreading about two-thirds of the COVID vaccine falsehoods online. And so within a single news cycle or two, the Biden White House was accused both of colluding with and being at war with Mark Zuckerberg's company.
Right. And how damaging is that for the White House to have to backpedal on these types of things? Does that in turn fuel more distrust, not just of social media companies, but of the government?
I think the press largely gave President Biden a pass on what was a pretty bad mistake. He usually chooses his words carefully. He's not somebody who throws a lot of rhetorical bombs, as Donald Trump often did in the service of making news, which he made a whole lot more news than the current president does, and that's by design. So when Biden just came out and said they're killing people, whether you agreed with that line of reasoning or not, it was very out of character, I think, for the 46th president. And when he had to pull it back a few days later under considerable pressure, you would think there'd be a lot of stories about what a big mistake this was by the president, and there was some criticism, but I think he largely skated.
There certainly have been a lot of COVID vaccine myths circulating, which, goes to the sort of misinformation debate, from fertility issues to will it change your DNA. Is there something the White House team should be doing differently to counter that? Maybe regular briefings with doctors other than Anthony Fauci, for example?
Yeah, Anthony Fauci certainly has become a lightning rod, especially for the right, in a way that I think is unfair. It's not that Fauci is above criticism. It's not that Fauci hasn't made mistakes in this pandemic. But when you have certain politicians, saying that he's the godfather of COVID-19, when he's devoted his whole life, going back to the Reagan administration, trying to fight infectious diseases, that strikes me as unfair, and I think is rooted in the criticism he got when he was working for Donald Trump from the former president, and then the promotion, in effect, that he got from President Biden. The problem is there's such a lack of mistrust. We talked a moment ago about the more complicated reasons why some people are refusing or very hesitant to get the vaccine. A lot of it clearly is tied up with politics. Red states, or certain red states compared to certain blue states, have the lowest vaccination rates. A lot of polls show a lot of conservatives and Republicans more hesitant than Democrats and liberals to get vaccinated. But it does go beyond that. If you live in a rural area, it can be harder to find a place with easy access. I've seen people in interviews talk about worrying about having to take a couple days off from work if they have the usual side effects. There is an age divide. There's an educational divide. There's a racial divide. Vaccination rates being much lower in minority communities. So I think it's a problem that's not going to be solved by giving out free beer or free weed or free baseball tickets or free lottery tickets. A lot of folks say that the persuasion effort should come from trusted voices in the community. doctors who live in your community, pastors, for example, and friends and family. I no longer believe that it's a problem that can be completely solved by government. And I do think the other interesting twist here in the media coverage is that now there is growing anger among some pundits against the unvaccinated. CNN's Don Lemon said they were acting in an idiotic manner. I don't think that helps anybody. It's certainly not going to change their minds. And even among ordinary people, the New York Times just ran a story saying that there's a lot more anger now among those who have gotten the shots that the risk or the pandemic is allowed to continue with this recent surge in cases over the last month or 6 weeks because of people who aren't getting the shots.
Are we on a dangerous path if we can't get off these dividing lines, whether it's vaccinated versus unvaccinated, which is just really a progression of the masked or unmasked debate, which now is kind of turning on its head because, even if you don't think if it's a political statement to wear a mask or not wear a mask, well, now if you're vaccinated, let's say, and you wear a mask just to be extra cautious, some people might think that you're wearing a mask because you're not vaccinated and be angry with you.
Yeah, well, people can make their own individual decisions ultimately about whether they should get vaccinated and whether they should wear a mask, even if they are vaccinated. I think the CDC is about to muddle this picture further by recommending that vaccinated people wear masks in a number of situations, particularly indoor situations, because that's going to undercut the incentive. The whole way this thing was sold was get the vaccine, live something close to a normal life. You don't have to walk around with a mask, and now I think it's going to be quite muddled. And yes, it reminds me all too much of the dispute over the 2020 election. Each side says the other is lying. Donald Trump continues to argue that it was a stolen election. The argument over the January 6th committee that just started its hearings in the House. And, of course, we have these continuing partisan arguments about the vaccine. The frustrating thing here is that if more Americans, if 75% of Americans, instead of just roughly 50%, were now fully vaccinated, and we have enough available for that to be the case, this pandemic would be all but over in the United States.
Just want to ask you one other question. After the Veteran Affairs became the first federal agency to mandate that healthcare personnel be fully vaccinated, could this be the beginning of broader mandates, even if you want to travel or for schools, for instance? And could a shift like that be part of the answer to getting more Americans to take the vaccines? If you want to do this, you got to do that.
We are absolutely moving in that direction. You now have New York City with municipal workers, the state of California, same thing, and the VA, as you mentioned, and other private businesses saying, yes, if you want to do this, you want to attend a concert, you want to go to this sporting event, you want to go to our shopping malls, you have to show proof of vaccination or a recent negative COVID test. And that I do think if that were to become more widespread, probably some of the people who are on the fence or hesitant would say, all right, I guess I got to give in because I want to do these things, particularly if their job is at stake. What I worry about, though, is that will set off an even bigger political backlash than we had with the lockdowns last year, where people will feel their personal freedom is being infringed upon, where people will feel like they don't want to cooperate and they're being forced to cooperate despite whatever is their best judgment for themselves and their families. So there's no easy answer here, but I think regardless of the resistance among, it's about 100 million Americans, that we are all moving in the direction of more mandates, but of course it's city by city, county by county, and business by business.
Howard Kurtz, host of Media Buzz, we are always very thankful for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks very much. Good to talk to you.
This is Janice Dean with your Fox News commentary. Coming up.
The rise back up in COVID cases has led to some concerns about the economy's recovery, already being pressured by rising inflation.
I'm always concerned about inflation, but I also believe the Federal Reserve has pointed out that they think this is short-term in nature.
While Democrats like Senator Mark Warner think prices will come down, Republicans worry about something else.
The Democrats' stay-home bonus to workers who remain unemployed has slowed the recovery and helped keep workforce participation stagnant.
Senator Mitch McConnell referring to extra federal unemployment assistance many states have ended. First-time jobless claims did increase unexpectedly last week, and more than 9 million Americans remain out of work. But there is another problem with unemployment benefits. Some of the money's been mismanaged. Even more has been stolen.
The Government Accountability Office found that states overpaid nearly $13 billion in unemployment benefits in the first year of the pandemic.
Hillary Vaughn is a Fox Business Network correspondent.
But really, the Department of Labor Office of Inspector General has said that that number is actually much bigger. They came out with a report in June that essentially estimates that from the duration of these boosted unemployment benefits during the pandemic, from when they began to be rolled out to when they are supposed to expire in September, there will have been $87 billion in fraudulent and improper payments made through that program to people who are intentionally trying to take advantage and use the system to get benefits that they know they are not entitled to.
And we're talking about the federal money here in this investigation?
These are state unemployment systems that are being targeted by fraudsters, and these states are in charge of doling out the extra federal unemployment benefit on top of what they already offer unemployed people in their states. And the reason why that's relevant is because it's not a federal system that has high cybersecurity. These are states that are fending for themselves, trying to use their existing and many times archaic unemployment systems to pay out these benefits to people. And they're being targeted by people not just in the United States. It's operations all over the world of essentially thieves trying to use stolen identities, stolen Social Security information, plugging it in on a mass wide-scale level to these state unemployment systems using fake email addresses, fake accounts, and then trying to essentially profit thousands and thousands of dollars through a wide-scale operation of essentially trying to manipulate and rig the system so they can take advantage of this. There have been many audits and studies from cybersecurity experts that say a lot of these essentially attacks are coming from outside the U.S., not just people here who are trying to get a little extra cash, but a wide-scale effort to fraudulently take advantage of the system.
Yeah, I saw one report where filings from 170 different countries when they investigated IP addresses and websites. So that's really stunning.
Yeah, and it's something that states are having a hard time defending, but they at least have an idea of that something is off, because in several states, the number of initial jobless claims exceeded the actual number of job losses in that state. So we know from a ProPublica report investigation that was published yesterday that Arizona, Georgia, Hawaii, Nevada, and Rhode Island had initial unemployment claims that outnumbered their entire pool of civilians that were claiming to be out of work. And so that tips off states that this is a wide-scale effort of people targeting their systems, and many times they're targeting many different states at the same time.
And of course, the states, they were overwhelmed with actual people out of work back in the spring, especially of 2020 and into the summer and fall. And so it's been hard for them to keep up with even regular claims, let alone know which ones are not real.
Right. And a lot of times it unfortunately hurts the people that need it most. There are cases after cases reported of people who need the unemployment, but they're told, we can't give you this benefit because someone using your information already has a claim filed in a different state, or we already paid out this benefit to someone posing as you. So it does hurt real people when their identities are being stolen.
What a nightmare to be told that you can't file because somebody stole the money that was supposed to go to you or would have gone to you. And then I don't even know what they do. How do they even fight that? That would take a long time, I would think.
Yeah, whenever your identity is stolen, it's a nightmare. But this information is basically being marketed and sold on the dark web. So whenever they're, looking at the broader picture, whenever there is a cyber hack, a major hack, and a lot of people get the notification that you need to change your password, your information could have been exposed. Well, all of those names and personal information is essentially packaged and sold to people who want to use it in different ways. And this trend during the pandemic has been to buy personal information that was stolen, being sold on the dark web, plug that into states' unemployment filing systems, and try to squeeze out as much money as you can. And the instances are really astounding when you look at what states are having to deal with. Vermont is just one example. In June, they said that in some months, 90% of the claims that were being filed in their system were fraudulent. So,
did you say 90%?
90%, 90.
Wow.
So it really is jaw-dropping and puts into perspective the need and the necessity to have states' unemployment systems upgraded and to have the money to do that, which ultimately President Biden did set aside $2 billion to do just that, because the federal government has said this is an epidemic and essentially a crisis and a security crisis, to try to upgrade these systems so that millions of dollars in federal aid that is supposed to go to people who need it is not leaving the country and going to essentially cyber criminals.
Now, some of these accused criminals have been charged. There's a man in New York City who allegedly got $1.5 million in 10 months. There's a Nigerian government official accused of pocketing over $350,000. And there was one person, according to the government, that used one Social Security number to file unemployment insurance claims in 40 states, and 29 of them paid $222,000. So this is really something. These people have really found a way.
Yeah, there's right now, or as of June, 17,000 complaints and investigations involving unemployment insurance fraud being investigated, and complaints that have been filed. They've been able to recover about $160 million. But again, when you compare that to how big the problem is, and a lot of these systems are being attacked today and will continue to be attacked as long as this remains profitable for people. So it's definitely a problem that the federal government is trying to tackle and figure out the best way to approach it. Some proposals that have been floated have been, maybe we need a federal system set up that is secure, and instead of letting states kind of fend for themselves and try to pay out these federal benefits on their own, because they're clearly becoming targets.
Well, we do know, though, from recent cyber attacks that it's not like the federal government is immune to being breached by hackers.
Right.
What is Congress doing about this?
They're basically trying to close loopholes in the system that really let people who commit small claims fraud from kind of escaping accountability and not letting them be prosecuted and not letting the funds be recovered. So this is something that has support from a bipartisan group of senators really trying to fine-tune the system and modernize the system so that they are able to catch these cyber sleuths that are taking advantage of the system, even outside the U.S., and make sure that the rules and regulations in place actually allow them to be prosecuted and the funds to be recovered, even on a small scale, but then also on an extremely large scale as well.
The other big issue with unemployment benefits, that extra money the federal government has been paying people. Initially, it was $600 a week, then it was cut to $300. But about half the states, mostly with Republican governors, have put a stop to that, claiming it's paying people too much, so some don't want to work. To which President Biden replied with his much talked about whispering,
"Employers can't find workers." I said, "Yeah, pay them more."
Well, some workers have gone to court getting those extra benefits back in Indiana and Maryland, and there's a lawsuit in Florida, too.
I think we're seeing, a labor shortage nationwide, and part of the argument from business owners that I've spoken to anecdotally is that people are making more money to be unemployed than they would be if they were at work. And the bottom line is a lot of these businesses can only raise their wages so much before they themselves are not able to be profitable and have to close. So some states have said, you know what, we're going to take away these benefits early because our businesses can't find the workers to stay open. But there are some states that are keeping it in place through September, and, we'll see what impact that has on their local economies. But there are a lot of benefits being paid to people, and it is a challenge for businesses to try to keep up. But I talked with Labor Secretary Marty Walsh about this. I asked him if he is worried that businesses are going to have to close if they're forced to pay double what they normally would. And he insisted that in his mind, he didn't think businesses were paying double. But we talked to businesses who many of them were paying minimum wage, so $7.25, and are paying $15 plus that, sometimes with signing bonuses. So that's a huge change for a business to pay double to have employees on the payroll than they had to pre-pandemic. And a lot of them are adapting, and a lot of Democratic lawmakers say it's a good thing that workers are making more money and paying more. But on the flip side of that, what we hear from business owners is it is a challenge, and they're, even with those inflated wages, they still are having a very hard time finding people to come back to work and to go to work.
Is there a push? I know Democrats do control Congress, and there is a Democrat in the White House. Is there a push to maybe extend this extra unemployment beyond the September deadline where it ends?
I think that idea has been floated, but I don't see a real push for that happening. But it really is up to, at the end of the day, what is able to get passed and what the president will sign.
Hillary Vaughn, Fox Business correspondent, following the unemployment situation. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Did you hear the news? Now you can. With instant updates from Fox News for Amazon Alexa. Just say,
Alexa, play news from Fox.
In Fox News.
It's the latest when you need it, on demand from Fox News and Amazon Alexa. Subscribe to this podcast at foxnewspodcasts.com.
It's time for your Fox News commentary.
Janice Dean.
What's on your mind?
When Representative Steve Scalise messaged me on Friday afternoon that he had received word via a letter that the Biden administration's investigation into the nursing home tragedy in New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Michigan was being dropped, I was incredibly sad, but not surprised. Representative Scalise had been helping me and other families behind the scenes in Washington to try and get answers about why Democratic governors ordered COVID-infected patients into nursing homes in the spring of 2020. Scalise sent me the letter and gave me permission to post about it on social media. I tweeted, "A terrible day for thousands of families." In a letter to Steve Scalise, the Justice Department wrote that they were dropping the nursing home investigations in all states, including New York. There will be no justice for our loved ones, and it feels like we've lost them all over again. It was August of 2020 that the U.S. Justice Department's Civil Rights Division requested information from New York in connection with the controversial March 25th order from the state's Department of Health that required nursing homes to admit COVID-19 positive patients who were discharged from hospitals. It also asked for records from Pennsylvania, Michigan, and New Jersey, states that have had the same mandates that, quote, may have resulted in the deaths of thousands of elderly nursing home residents. The reason? Here's what the Deputy Assistant Attorney General wrote last week, quote, we have reviewed the information provided by these states along with additional information to the department, and based on that review, we have decided not to open a CRIPTA investigation of any public nursing facilities within New York, Pennsylvania, or Michigan at this time. For months, we were waiting for answers. As we waited, several sources were telling me the investigation was being swept under the rug. In January of this year, a senior Justice Department official confirmed to me that New York State had failed to provide any data as of their October request. Not only did Governor Andrew Cuomo and his administration fail to provide any information to the Justice Department, lawmakers, countless reporters, and grieving families who have asked it be disclosed, he blamed others for his disastrous mandate and instead says it's all politically motivated. But I will forever be grateful to former Attorney General William Barr and the Trump administration for launching the investigation because this was the springboard to the potentially more politically damaging investigation here in New York by the FBI and the Brooklyn U.S. Attorney's Office. People have asked me if, after last week's terrible news from the DOJ, the other investigations will hold up. My answer is I have to believe our governor will be held accountable in the end. There is another report coming out in the next few weeks from New York Attorney General Letitia James that I hear will not be favorable. And if Cuomo continues to hang around until the election next November, there's always the hope he will be voted out. As for the other states that had similar tragedies in nursing homes, where is the accountability for their leaders' deadly decisions? Now more than ever, it's up to us, the people in these states, to use our voices and demand answers from our elected officials. We must hold them accountable on behalf of our families, especially those who have been silenced forever. Janice Dean, Fox News.
You've been listening to the Fox News Rundown. Stay up to date by subscribing to this podcast at foxnewspodcasts.com. And for up-to-the-minute news, go to foxnews.com. From the Fox News Podcasts Network.
I'm Ben Domenech, publisher of The Federalist, and I'm inviting you to join a new conversation with the smartest thinkers out there about the country and where we're going. Subscribe to the Ben Domenech Podcast.
Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com.
Love Fox News? Click the subscribe button to get more of the news and opinion you trust. And click the Fox News Rundown playlist for the latest episodes.